Hey Internet, my name is Suzy. You may know me from, I'm going to put my phone down first of all. You may know me from Tales from Serial on Saturday, where I play Brigitte, our handy dandy fighter. And I also play Ophelia on Sundays, who is very much a waif and not a handy dandy fighter yet. And I occasionally DM for here, us, at Roll for Trouble. So thanks again for joining us tonight. Tonight I am going to talk about the Curse of Strahd one shot that we did 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Fuck, time's hard. I don't care anymore. Much like Ophelia. So the setup for the Curse of Strahd Death House one shot is fairly simple. You have children. If you go by the book, the children are supposed to be outside of the house crying. Because I set it up a little bit differently, the children were inside of the house crying. So the way I set it up is it was supposed to be the adventurers were hired by. I said a slumlord in the stream, and I'm not going to change it. Were hired by a slumlord to investigate this house that the slumlord had recently come into acquisition of, and basically for some reason couldn't keep workers together at the house. They would flee in terror because the house was doing something to them. And the adventurers were hired to sort of go and clean it up and make sure there's no actual paranormal activity. So we had who we affectionately called our Rage Mage, which was Grandma Whisk, who was an Air Ganassi, who was one level barbarian, 2 levels wizards. Sorry, Andy's sitting right across from me, and I have to double check with her. Then we also had Ohm, who was a blue dragonborn paladin, and then we had Brian playing, I forgot, who was a rogue, I believe. I forgot, y'all. Time is hard right now.
He's a dusk elf.
Dusk elf. Basically, he was like a dusk elf variant of some sort, and I forgot. He was a rogue, though. He did some stabby stabs, from my recollection of it. So, because we were sort of crunched on time, and let's be real, if you go back and watch the stream, Polar Bear was not exactly thrilled with the idea of running through the house. So it was definitely a lot shorter than it could have been. Because we were so pressed for time, the players really didn't explore the house as much as I had hoped they would. So they got to miss a lot of the fun backstory type of stuff, and also the potential for Whisk to have picked up a spell book with several wizard spells already prepared inside of it. Pretty much I kind of wanted it to be sort of very straightforward, because in a way I wanted them to sort of get through this by that evening. So I pretty much had the children, who are named Rose and Thorn. They pretty much directed the party to go upstairs. There could have been a lot more. I feel like on my part there could have been a lot more roleplay stuff with Rose and Thorn. But again, because we were sort of pressed for time, we started very late that evening. Instead of starting at 6, we started around like 7. We had some technical difficulties that night. So it was a little bit frustrating on my part as DM, having the technical difficulties beforehand. So I sort of rushed through it a little bit more than I should have. But that's fine. This was supposed to be a one-shot anyways. I think my favorite part of the beginning of the adventure is Whisk going straight upstairs to the second floor, where there was a suit of armor. And had Whisk left it alone, the armor would have been fine. But she went up and she was like, "I whack it! I poked it with my stick," or whatever. And then that provoked the armor to attack, and that started their first encounter, which made Ohm 5,000,000% done with this house. In the very beginning, he also did cast like a basically detect undead sort of spell thing. I don't remember exactly what it was called. But he could sort of tell that the children were undead. In all actuality, the children are illusions cast by the house itself to sort of lure people into their deaths, as all the occupants of the house are dead. By the way, if you do hear the pitter-patter of little kitty cat feet, the kitty cats are out, and hopefully they won't be assholes, but we're going to find out as one of them is sort of wandering up to the mic now. Oh no, you're leaving? Okay, good. Bye! Go away. No, leave, bye. So... Yes, undead. So he sort of cast a spell, or cast his detect paladin thingy, that let him find out if what the children actually were. And I just went ahead and straight up was like, yeah, they're undead. Because they're really an illusion cast by the house, so really they're not there. And ideally, once the players step inside of the house, the illusion ends. Because the children are again, only there to lure people into the house, lure them into thinking that there's a monster in there. So I had them stick around for a little bit longer probably than they should have, just to sort of guide the players along and get them to the upstairs floor where they needed to go. A bit of a failure on my part was not preparing all the maps beforehand. So using D&D Beyond, I can pull, there's a player versions of the map that I can pull up, and it's very nice, very high quality. I didn't clip all the rooms because I was like, they're not going to go to all the rooms, I can just broadcast this thing on the TV, That was a terrible decision on my part. So I should have clipped out all the rooms, so they could have seen it a little bit better. But that's actually one of the things that I did like about the session, was the fact that this is going to sound super fancy and like, pinky out and all this nonsense, but with my Windows 10 laptop and my Xbox, I can make them talk to each other, and I can then broadcast images to the TV using the Xbox, so that way I don't have to have hand-drawn maps, because let's be real, I'm lazy, and I don't want to do that. So, that's one thing that sort of helped me prepare better, but I should have done it days beforehand, just so I should have had everything lined up, because there was a bit of confusion on my part, where they did find a secret passage that led down to the basement, that they were not actually supposed to find unless they went to a specific room, and did a specific thing, which they did, but ultimately it was like, oh, you guys shouldn't have actually have found that. Whoops. My bad. They did at least do a couple of fights, slightly important ones. They did... the fighting of the enchanted suit of armor was great. But I will tell you that as the AC on that suit of armor probably should have been a lot lower. I started my group out at level 3. And the house is supposed to be hard, but if you run your players through it starting at level 1, I sincerely doubt that any of them are going to hit something with an AC of 18. If I had to do multiple things over again for that encounter, I would probably have either raised their level 1 more, or if I started them at level 1, I would have lowered the DC of the AC on the suit of armor drastically. We'll get to this a little bit later, but part of the whole thing of the Death House is that once they complete the adventure, depending on the ending, depends on then basically the quality of the house following. So the house with its suit of armor with a DC of 18, depending on the ending that you get, which is the one that my players got, that suit of armor really shouldn't have been that high. They did fight a banshee, though, which was great, and they sort of did uncover a murder most foul that they promptly ignored, which was fun. They were like, oh, it's a dead body. Yes, she looks like she's been stabbed multiple times, and she's dead. Okay, are there footprints leading in and out? Yes, but they're extremely old. Cool. we're leaving this room. All right, that's fine, guys. That's completely fine. They did find the dead bodies of Rose and Thorn, though, in the attic. Spoiler alert, my bad, should have told you sooner. Rose and Thorn are dead, and they were basically starved to death in the attic because their parents, who were terrible people, locked them away and then forgot about them and forgot to feed them. So, yay. Excellent ending to the adventure, or excellent ending for them. There is a thing that can happen where you can, and I didn't do this because, again, we were sort of pressed for time and I didn't want to deal with it. But as soon as the players try and leave the room, the ghosts of Rose and Thorn can appear and attempt to possess one of the characters, and they gain a flaw and the personality of Rose and Thorn until either the bodies are laid to rest or they are dispelled. It's one or the other. So my players didn't do that, and again, I didn't feel like dealing with it, so we completely glossed over that. Again, I was sort of pressed for time, and I wanted this adventure to just be over with. Not because I was unhappy with it, but because, again, I was kind of like, we need to keep moving, let's keep moving, and we're walking. So, after they found the bodies of Rose and Thorn, they did at least find the dollhouse, and they did make the surprisingly low wisdom check, which is fine. It's not supposed to be a difficult wisdom check, only the fights are supposed to be hard. That they found the secret passage that I accidentally revealed to them earlier. My bad. So then they traveled downwards to the basement, completely bypassed every single one of the crypts, which was a good thing, because the first crypt, they were like, we should open this. And I was like, please don't open this, oh my god, don't open this, y'all. Because the first one they wanted to open was basically had a swarm of bugs inside of it. And I was like, please don't, I don't want to do this, please don't. Luckily, they skipped past it, and I was like, yes, I don't have to deal with this! So, and then they also, the first one they wanted to open would have been empty. The next one, then I would have been like, okay, they're probably going to want to open more. Which would have then involved more enemies and more encounters, and I was like, please don't. So, the book does not specify, as you go through the very bottom basement level of the house, does not sort of specify where the chanting is coming from. So, okay, back up, reverse. When your players hit the basement of the death house, they hear chanting, and it's supposed to be unintelligent chanting. So, I specifically, again, because I wanted this adventure to be over with, I was like, okay, I'm going to give you guys directions on where it's coming from. In the book, it does not actually state where the voices are coming from. It's just all around you, to sort of force you to explore further. But again, we were sort of pressed for time because we started late due to technical issues, so I was like, yeah, it's coming from this direction, let's go. Go on, we're walking. They at least did avoid the mimic trap that was in another room, because they walked into, like, I think a giant mess hall, and there's a mimic trap that's in there. They completely avoided that because they weren't interested in touching stuff. They walked down a hallway, and they disarmed a spike trap, which was great. Good job on them. And they made their way, finally, to the lower level, the lowest possible level of the house, which is a cult headquarters. By this point in the adventure, it should have been made clear to your players that this house was not just a home, it was housing a cult. Again, because my players didn't explore anything because I wanted them to sort of be done with this and finish up everything. They did miss a lot of the plot detailed points. So they didn't get any sort of anything fun flavor-wise. It was just like, oh, this is a creepy house. So they go into the room with the 13 magical items, all of which are basically useless, except for one wand that looks like it could be mistaken for a wand of polymorph. And our rogue picked it up and was smart enough to be like, hey, Whisk, what's this? And Whisk was like, oh, it's bullshit. and then Ohm promptly proceeded to knock everything off the walls like a cat and break it. Once your players hit the second level of the basement, the chanting should become louder and more clear. Sorry, the cat was looking at Carolyn and she was waving at the cat, and the cat was completely disinterested.
She had her little fangs.
She had her little teefies out?
Yeah.
Teefies, y'all. Kitty cat teefies. So adorable.
How many teeth she got?
As soon as your players hit the second level of the basement area, the chanting becomes louder and more clear, and you should hear the phrase, "He is ancient, he is the land," which is sort of something that you hear from Strahd if you find the Tome of Strahd, and bother to read it. Let's be real here. Let's read his diary, it's fine. So you hear them chanting, "He is ancient, he is the land." As the players sort of walk into the... first they didn't walk in. They had to lift a portcullis, which was really funny. And then I locked them in there because I wanted them to do the fight. I was like, nah, fam, you're doing this fight. So, there is a portcullis that sort of takes you from the reliquary room with the 13 useless pieces of bullshit into the actual main ceremonial chamber. It's like a DC 20 strength check, and the two of them Whisk and Ohm working together, managed to get it up, which was amusingly funny because to first get into the house, I made them raise a gate, and Ohm couldn't do it on first try, but Grandma Whisk, who just like horked it up all by herself, which was really funny. And Ohm was like, "No, you don't need me. You're fine. You've got this. You've totally got this." I don't know if you guys know the story behind Whisk, but she was a completely randomly generated character using D&D Beyond. D&D Beyond even came up with the name, right? It was great. It's absolutely amusing. Yeah, sorry if you hear the hanking of the Kamala beast. She's Kamala. And a detention whore. Let's be real here. No one cares. Stop. We're talking about Strahd. So, ceremonial chamber. As soon as they lift the portcullis, my players made it into the ceremonial chamber. As soon as they make it into the chamber, the chanting that they hear stops. And my players at least found that interesting. So it was curious enough for them to start wandering the room and checking things out. But it was great because nobody actually wanted to get on the dais at first. They're like, "What's on the dais?" And I'm like, "Well, it's this thing and a bloodied knife." "Okay, can I reach the knife from where I'm standing?" "No, you have to get on the dais." "Okay, what if I use my stick and try and get the... No, you have to stand on the dais to get the thing." "Okay, fine."
I levitated. I did not ever step on the thing.
So, as soon as somebody approaches the dais, regardless of whether or not you're levitating or not, that's when it activates all 13 of the cult spirits. They stand on the platform sort of around the edge of the room, and they all start chanting, "One must die, one must die." Ideally, this is to mean that one of the players would die. However, you can also refuse to do that. And that's when the Shambling Mound is activated. So, them being, not terrible human beings and realizing that there's only 3 people in the party, decided not to kill somebody in the party, and activated the Shambling Mound. I nerfed the hell out of that Shambling Mound. It had damage immunities to, all sorts of non-magical weapons, and it also had... I think it had damage immunities to all a ton of non-magical weapons. But it also had damage immunity, complete immunity from lightning, and it had resistance to non-magical weapons. So they were doing half damage to it, unless you cast a spell. Ohm, who I don't even think bothered to use his breath weapon, which would have been real amusing, regardless, they're still doing a good chunk of damage to it, But the fight took about as long as expected. If it was like a normal, if it had been a normal monster with the HP that the Shambling Mound had, it probably would have been fine. But at some point, because I just started nerfing the Shambling Mound, the fight went a lot faster, and then they could freely leave the house. Here's also another part where I completely nerfed. Sorry. Kamala's being held and she's purring obnoxiously loud as she is wont to do. And then she meeped slightly angrily because she wanted to leave.
You weren't struggling at all. Like, fuck you.
And Caroline wouldn't let her. It was funny. Anyways, so once the Shambling Mound is defeated, there's supposed to be more stuff that actually happens with the house. The house is actually supposed to sort of start disintegrating and falling apart. All of the doors and all of the windows are suddenly bricked up, and any door to actually even get out of the house suddenly becomes a trap. And you have to make a certain dexterity roll to even be able to get out of the house without having much damage done to you. That was a little excessive for me, and again, because I was crunched for time, I chose not to exercise those options. Again, kind of upon further reflection, had we not been so pressed for time, I probably could have run the adventure a little bit longer. I probably would have done things, obviously the beginning a little bit differently. I definitely think I would have done the end a lot differently. I would have made them make those dexterity saving throws to try and not take the damage that they would have taken. Overall, the Death House is not... I would say I would not recommend it for a party of 3. You ideally want a party of at least 4, maybe even 5. So you want a full party of adventurers. At the very least, I don't want you to play it with... If you do decide you want to play it with 3 people, you really want to go with your standard party of a tank, a rogue, and a healer of some sort. Ideally, you'd go with a 4th person so you can have somebody else doing damage as well. Or somebody else who has also some pretty good insight checks or wisdom checks or whatever. Just having a 4th person generally is very helpful. With the way that the adventure is structured, the players are not supposed to be level 3 until they reach the outside of the house. And players are not supposed to hit level 2 until they find the hidden staircase in the house, which is only found if you're looking at the dollhouse and you make that wisdom check, which is like a DC of 12. So if you make that wisdom check and you can find the staircase, then your players automatically go up to level 12. Sorry, 12. 2. You don't gain 11 levels, but with 1 check, which would be amusing and interesting. But let's not do that.
Ultimate power.
Ultimate power here in this dollhouse. Ah, smash! I'm gonna go fight Strahd now. So again, I would definitely not recommend this for if you are crunched for time, you have like only 3 hours to play. I think that's how long it took us to get through it. I would not recommend the adventure for parties. I would not recommend it if you have less than 3 hours to play. I would say you definitely want to have at least 4, maybe 5 if your party can stand it. I would say don't try not to play with 3 people. You really want to have at least a minimum of 4. Maybe 5 if you're starting at level 1. I would say also consider your party and make it kind of try and make it be nice to them as you're going through this house, because this is designed to be the opening to an adventure that can take you up to level 10. So I did read somewhere on Tumblr where a guy was critiquing the opening adventure, and he was like, I would completely nerf the monster because this is dumb. And I was like, no, don't nerf the monster. The monster's cool. Who nerfed the monster? Yeah, it was me. Because, like, just for a level 3 party with what... I mean, to be fair, though, to the monster, its stats were pretty low, so they could have hit. But with the amount of resistances that it had, it probably would have been a lot harder had I actually bothered to be like, oh, let's use its blind sense. It can sense you. It can sense the other 2 people that are standing over here. It's gonna hit you. Had I actually used the monster to its fullest abilities, they would have been in trouble. Because Grandma Whisk would have gone down real quick. I did nerf a lot of that. So had I actually bothered to play it to its fullest extent, it probably would have been a lot harder. And again, because we were short on time, it would have been a lot more frustrating. So, yeah. Those are my thoughts and feelings on the Death House. Do we have any questions from chat?
Yeah. How do you decide what parts to keep when you're really in a rush?
Honestly, you want to make sure that your players are hitting the high points. So, again, a lot of the flavor text was lost. But I did sort of want them to make sure that they at least found that secret passageway that I accidentally revealed to them earlier. Had they failed to do that, and gone back down the secret passageway again, to hit the first floor, I would have at some point said, you know what, make me a perception check, and had a really low DC on it to be like, okay, there's a door here. It looks like it goes even lower than what we saw before. Aw, man, maybe you guys should push that open a little bit further. But at some point, it's really up to you. You really want to make sure, though, again, that they are sort of advancing the storyline and anything you can do to help it out. Like, even if it's, oh, we open this door here to the left, and that door is supposed to take them into, like, the grand ballroom, but you really need them to go into the study. Fuck it, reverse the rooms. Cool, that's now the study. The grand ballroom's over there. They won't know. Nobody's read the book. Unless it's Curse of Strahd, because then I've read the book. I haven't memorized all the maps, so it's fine. Anything else?
Do you think that it's a good introduction to Strahd?
Yes, it's an amazing introduction to Strahd. Just the Death House itself has a lot more, I feel, flavor text that you can get sort of a feel for Strahd. The story of the Durst family is a very tragic one, in the fact that if the players had actually done this and bothered to explore the house a little bit more, that they would have found letters from, or at least a letter from Strahd that a previous adventurer had found, but, was killed by the trap that was on the box. And Strahd basically telling the Durst family to fuck off. You can also then put in, again, depending on how pressed for time you are, you can put in more flavor text. The Durst family was basically sacrificing people to Strahd, whom they felt was a god. But their unfortunate part is they killed a band of adventurers that Strahd had lured to his domain and sort of cut his fun short. So then Strahd showed up and was like, fuck this shit, all of you guys are dead, and basically murdered everybody. So the house is a great way to sort of introduce not only Strahd himself as as a villain, but also sort of get the creepy tone for the whole feel of Barovia itself. It's a very depressing land. It's a very creepy land, and you sort of get the impending sense that, things are going to happen. At the end of the Death House adventure, regardless of what happens, either if your players do decide to kill someone to appease the cult and get out of there alive, or if they defeat the Shambling Mound and make it out of the house alive, Strahd knows one way or another. So I think it's a great intro to Barovia, with more flavor text than if you had done, say, one of the werewolf intros. Anything else? No? Cool. Well, it's been fun chatting with you guys. Our schedule for this upcoming weekend is we are doing another spoopy adventure on Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. And then Sunday at 10 a.m., we are going to have another episode of River of Turrisel. Our spoopy one-shot for Saturday is going to be run by the illustrious Carolyn. And she is who just did deuces, but none of you could see it because she's off camera. So she's going to be doing the Pumpkin King.
The Pumpkin King.
I'm calling it's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown, and she's going to murder my character, so I will have a backup character just in case this happens. Grandma Whisk will be back. So if y'all like seeing Andy as a little old grandma, Grandma Whisk will be back. My God, she's great. I love her already. So that's going to be our Saturday. It's one of our spoopy one-shots, again, starting at 6 p.m. Eastern. River of Turrisel will be at 10 a.m. on Sunday. Next week, we also have another DM chat with one of the... No, they're pointing... Well, there was some pointing going on here, and we had no idea what was going on. Anyways, that was great. So it was going to be either Andy or Carolyn. We're going to figure this out. But Andy is totally pointing the finger at Carolyn. So it looks like it's going to be one of these two.
I'm the creative director, I think. I know.
I'm sorry, guys. I completely fucked up our schedule because I forgot I had a previous engagement. So my bad. And then the following Saturday, not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after, we are doing 2 games. We have we have Tales. Thank you. My brain was stuck on a river. It was bad. We have Tales from Cyril starting at noon, and then at 6 p.m. we have another spoopy one-shot. Ooh, it's going to be great. Don't know what we're playing yet, but that's fine, because we'll figure that out at some point. So anyways, it's been great fun, Internet. I hope you love Strahd as much as I do. And we will see you this coming Saturday at 6 p.m. for the Pumpkin King one-shot adventure run by Carolyn. I look forward to my death repeatedly. It's going to be fun. I'm just going to start writing junior, second, the third. Every time my character dies, it's going to be fun. So, again, we will see you next Saturday. Or this coming Saturday. Haha! Days of the week are hard, just like time. So, bye, Internet!